This concept of reflection is quite interesting, right? Because in traditional software, you don't have this. Could you
Yeah,
elaborate on what reflection is and how it helps autonomous agents?
absolutely. So I forget where I read. I was reading some blog, and I can share the link later. Is that how software is changing, right? Like how the software development life cycle, as we know, is like changing a bit because yeah, like you said, we were not using LLMs prior to this. LLMs are more non-deterministic. So what happens when you bring in non-determinism into a deterministic workflow pipeline? How many checkpoints do you need to measure? What do you need to measure for each checkpoints? And also like not really over-engineer it. Otherwise, it's going to be like a too complicated system with 5 different agents where you really don't need that many. Maybe it can just be one trigger agent and the rest of the workflow remains as is with the additional capability of tools, like I was saying. So when you use something like reflection, it's mostly for the LLM to really critique itself. So underlying concept is still LLM as a judge, but
Mm.
again, being like a responsible builders, like as consider myself to be, I really don't want to give all the autonomy or the decision making to my reflection agent itself, because I think there were some studies also where we saw, and there's too many papers that's going around, right? I completely missed the headlines, but it's basically talked about how LLM is a little bit biased towards output from another LLM, and it can like figure out and then say, oh, this is better than something very similar but written by a human agent, maybe in a different way. So how do we take all of these into consideration when we are building that system? So we have smaller checkpoints. Also, we have very specific business guidelines that the LLM is using from the historical data as well as the current workflow data that the reflection agent is evaluating alongside the output from the previous eval component that we were talking about, right?